How many of you have heard of advanced social psychology before? You heard? Do you mind sharing? What did you hear? What did you hear about advanced social psychology?
No, I think it's similar to a concept.
Similar to judgment and decision making. Yeah, kind of. So you took judgment and decision making. When? Last year. What did you think of judgment and decision making? Be honest. Hard? It was a hard course? And really busy, right? Yeah. So if you want to know about this course, you can talk to her afterwards. Because judgment and decision making, the course that she mentioned, 2071, is the other course that I'm giving. And actually, the syllabus is very, very similar in the structure. So the assignments are very, very similar. The way that we do the course is very similar, but the topics are completely different. So judgment and decision making focuses on judgment and decision making, and advanced social psychology focuses on social psychology and the open science reform that I'll be sharing with you about. Some projects in social psychology will touch on judgment decision making, so will be some kind of a mix, but I'll try and keep these things separate so you won't get bored. So we'll begin. You will keep track of like if people are saying stuff on Zoom or, yeah. So it's kind of hybrid in a way, because I know there's some students that are not here, that are stuck in quarantine or in a different country. And I've never spoken to people in person with a mask on, so I know it's difficult. It's difficult for me to see how you're doing, how well you're coping. And it's difficult for you to read my facial expressions and see what's going on. So everything about this situation is unreal, but we'll cope together. But I do ask, if possible, if something is happening not to your liking, something is bothering you, something is off, please tell me. Generally, in a regular class, when we can get together, the way that I did this like a year ago, but the first 2 years, is actually we sit together in a circle, we do some games and engagement, I activate you, we do discussions and all this, but it's not going to happen with this one. So it's going to be a little bit more like what I did in the previous semester, which was completely on Zoom. So we'll adjust together. I'll walk you through what is going to happen through this course. I won't go over the syllabus in detail, but I'll ask that you'll go over this when you go home, and then we can talk about it next week. But I will try and tell you what this project/course is about. Hopefully to convince you either to be very motivated about this course or to convince you that maybe you should drop this course and seek other courses or other instructors, which is completely okay. But you need to know what you're getting yourself into, because this course is going to be very different from other courses. Okay. Just so you know, everything that we do in this course, including my lectures, including the tutorials, including everything, is shared, recorded, and shared. So you'll have access to this afterwards if you want to go and revisit things and have a look at this. Also, if you want, you can go back to previous semester and see what we did in previous semester. Plus, oh, right, it's hidden over there, but I think it's here. The slides, you can download the slides if you want to have a look at the slides and follow together with me. So it's going to keep appearing over there on the bottom left if you want to download. So just take into consideration that things are recorded. This is going to keep coming up. This is the essence of open science. Everything that I do and everything that you do is going to be shared with everybody. So it's not like you submit to me or you submit to the TAs and we're the only ones who give you feedback. You will see each other's projects. You will give each other peer review. Plus, everybody in the world is going to see what you're doing, because you will receive peer review from professionals, from scholars from around the world that will go into your Google Docs and will give you real feedback on your projects. And I will explain how this thing will work. I strongly encourage you to go and have a look at the syllabus. It's, I think right now, 43 pages long. It keeps growing every year. Plus, and this is very important over here, we have a quiz on the syllabus. There's no grade over this quiz, but in order to participate in this course, you need to pass the quiz. There's no ability to fail. You just need to go through every screen, and it makes sure that you understand what this is about. The reason why you have a quiz on the syllabus is because this is kind of like a contract, setting expectations between you and I so we understand each other. I don't want you to go into this course after the ad drop period, week 3, and then come to me and say, but we didn't know that this is how the course is going to be. A lot of the problems in the evaluations that I get is we didn't know, but it's impossible not to know if you have to go through the syllabus and you have to do the quiz on the syllabus. That's why the quiz is kind of long, but it makes sure that you understand what the syllabus is about and what's going to happen in this course. In addition, the course does not end when the course ends. So after the semester is over, you and I are going to keep working together. I won't demand anything of you, but the work that you do in this course will be submitted to journals. Because this work is submitted to journals, I will keep communicating with you. I will tell you what it is that we're doing, and you are going to be my co-authors. You're going to be my collaborators. In order for this to happen, you need to understand what it means to be my co-author, what it means to be my collaborator, what it means to submit your work to journals. So this is why it's very important that you do this carefully. Read the syllabus and go through the quiz. Any questions about this? Not yet. Anytime you have questions, let me know. If you want to see what this course was like before you make the decision of whether to remain in this course or drop this course, you can go and visit. Everything that we did last semester is on YouTube, a playlist. You can go and have a look. All the workshops that I did on Jamovi are everything that we did, advanced social psychology and judgment and decision making. Everything is on YouTube. So you can go and have a look. It's less interactive. It was not in person. So it's me speaking to the camera, but we'll give you kind of like a feeling of what the lectures and the tutorials and the workshops were like. Plus, all the slides, all the guides, everything that we do is shared publicly, not just with you on Moodle, on the Open Science Framework. So you can go up here and have a look at these links and see everything that's been done, not only in 2020, but also in the previous one. Things that I will change in this course is that I try to improve every semester. So I add more things, more stories, more case studies. I try to update this every semester. And the tasks are different. So in judgment decision making, last semester in advanced social psychology, they did projects on one set of articles. We'll do a completely different set of articles. So basically, even though everything is shared and you can go back and see everything that we've been doing in the other courses, it will not help you much in terms of the projects that you need to do now. There's a lot of learning that you will need to do on your own in order to address your own research projects. Plus, I strongly encourage you, I don't think a lot of instructors do this, and I think it's very important. Everything that I do, all the evaluations that I get, all the evaluations that the course gets are open for the world to see, so you can go and have a look. Teaching portfolio explains what my philosophy of teaching is about, and I'll tell you a little bit about that during the next hour. Plus this project, what it is that you will be part of. And I think it's really important for me to tell you that you have a choice. You don't have to be here. You don't have to take this course with me. There are other instructors that do things more traditionally. So if something here doesn't seem right to you, you prefer, I don't know, multiple choice questions at the end with an exam, or something like that, then there are the other options. First, there are the other capstone courses, plus there are the other instructors for this course with a Psych 3052 C and D that are given by other instructors. So you don't have to take this with me. If you want to hear about what this project is about, everything that I'm going to tell you more in detail, up to 3 hours, you can go and have a look at this YouTube video. It explains everything that I've been doing with the students in my courses in the last 3 years. Plus, if you need more information about this project and everything that we've been doing, then this is the link. If you want to know more about open science after this lecture, you can go on this URL over here. Okay, a set of warnings if I haven't warned you enough. This course is going to be different. Different how? In my postdoc, so I've been here at HKU for about, this is my 4th year. So before coming here to Hong Kong University, I was in a university called Maastricht University in the Netherlands. It's on the border with Belgium and Germany. It's a lovely little town, very picturesque, and a very interesting Dutch culture that's mixed with Belgian-French culture, that's mixed with German, Western German culture. So it's a really interesting place to be. And this university 40 years ago or so was built on the concept of problem-based learning. So this is the traditional way that I'm now speaking to you because of this pandemic, but this is kind of like professor stands in front of the class and tells the class, the truth is, this is the truth, follow me, this is what it is that you need to know in order to do well in industry. But Maastricht University says that this actually doesn't work very well, and now we have a lot of accumulating evidence that we need to change the way that we think. So this is a book that came out a few months ago from a very prominent thinker in organizational behavior and social psychology, Adam Grant. I strongly recommend this guy. One of the chapters talks about rewriting the textbook. So teaching students to question knowledge. So rather than everything that I say, you believe me just because I'm the professor, a different way is to train you to have a scientist mindset. So if you read something about vaccinations, you read something about a vaccine or the pandemic or COVID or anything else that you see in the news and you want to know, is this real? How do I trust this evidence? I don't want you to just go to the professor and say, Professor, is this real? The professor tells you, yeah, believe me because I'm the professor. I want you to be able to look at this evidence and question this with a critical mindset. Evaluate, is this credible evidence, yes or no? So this book, in my personal philosophy, is that we need to adopt the scientist mindset. We need to have a lot of humility. So I don't think that I have much more knowledge than, let's say, you do. In a lot of things, you are much better than I am. In my work with students, many times I find that I can learn from the students, that they have skills that I don't have. So by adopting humility, by saying, please work with me, we can both enrich one another, working together, which is why everything in this course is about collaborative work. Everything is open, everything is shared, everything is us working together. Confusion is natural. Some people try to tell you, no, this is the truth because this will bring order to things. I'm not scared of confusion. I think confusion is natural. Science is complex. And in order to make sense of this, we need to embrace uncertainty. And then we need to talk about probabilities in order to understand how to proceed forward. So science is messy. And students, you, and I will show you evidence for this, you as students have the ability to inform science. You can make a real change in science. Therefore, in Maastricht University, problem-based learning, and in this course, we have a different attitude. So I will do this because they're forcing me to do this at HKU. I will teach you, share with you stories about what it is that I see and do. However, a lot of it is this. You working together in groups, we'll separate you into groups and teams. A team is a team of 4, group is 2. So 2 groups of 2 people is a team of 4, and you'll work together on real science projects in order to learn something about social psychology. So rather than one person, professor, telling everybody what the truth is everybody sitting together and talking about things. There's a discussion. What does the mentor do? What does the instructor do? I guide you. I don't tell you what the truth is. I try to help you in your journey so that all of us will figure things out together. I also base my teaching philosophy on a few recent papers that came out about what it means to teach open science to students. So you can see students are the answer to psychology's replication crisis. What is this crisis? What does it mean, a replication crisis? I will tell you. Plus, this paper that came out about teaching replication. So in this course, you will be learning by doing replications, well, repeating things that have been studied in social psychology and trying to see, is this reliable? Is this trustworthy? Can we find the same things if we want the same experiment again? Other projects, I won't go into this right now. These are the principles that I set for this course. So most important thing is that this is student-led. So anytime that you feel that you have something to contribute, something that you want to bring in, if you want to change something that I'm doing, please let me know. We have Slack channels where everybody can contribute, help one another. So sometimes you will ask me questions, or the TAs, you'll ask them, how do we do this? How do we do that? Many times we will share our experience, but sometimes we will just open this up for other students. And sometimes other students do a much better job at answering your questions than I do. You do actual science with real impact. Like I said, we're going to submit all of this to journals, and we've been publishing this with students. So students are co-authors leading on real publications in science journals, showing that what you do really matters. It's not just, doesn't stay just here in the classroom, but it really has impact on society. And we'll use the latest trends and the latest tools in psychological science. So this will give you really hands-on training on everything. Another thing that I had to deal with is that when I came into HKU, they told me, this is the book for social psychology, please teach this. And then as I was flipping through the book, I realized that a lot of the things in the book, even if it's a recent book, let's say 2016, a lot of problems with the findings in this book. And I'll give you some example later on what I'm talking about. So I'm not using books. I'm using latest, up-to-date information that's based on the most recent evidence from articles that I think are trustworthy. And together with me, we'll reach an assessment of what is trustworthy. How do we make sense of whether to trust an article, trust a book, or not? Open science principles. Like I said, everything is open, everything is shared. I share on my side, and you will share on your side. So take into consideration that everything that you do in this course will be open, will be transparent. People will not know your grade, but they will know how well you've done. Now, this is really scary for a lot of people. It was also scary for me as a PhD student. What do you mean? I need to share all my data, all my code, all my thought process, everything that I've done. But part of this is just us scared that somebody is going to find out that we're wrong. But the thing about science is that it's very, very important that people help us find that we're wrong. You don't want to know 20 years later in the future that you were wrong when you were an undergraduate, and then for 20 years, people built on something that was flawed, that you went into the industry and built based on knowledge that is flawed. So by opening everything up, by telling others, please help me figure out whether this is wrong. This is how we improve. So by opening this up to peer review from your peers, opening this up for me and the TAs, opening this up for the community, you can get real feedback so you can learn and improve. So you will really have the best knowledge, that you will really know that you haven't made mistakes. This is how science makes progress. This is how we know that we get things accurately. So we focus mostly on accuracy and rigor. I don't care so much about novelty. I will ask you to do replications and extensions, but the most important thing is that you're comprehensive and you're transparent. Show us how you've done each and every decision. In every submission in this course, there are two stages. The first stage is you do the best work that you can. I will not grade this. Then you will do peer review on each other. I will open this to the world. They will give you feedback. And then you will have, for all of the assignments, 1 week to improve. And then I will see, how did you learn from the feedback? How did you implement the improvement? And I will only grade the final product to show that I really care about what you've learned, rather than were you accurate the first time that you submitted this. I don't believe in hierarchy. It's up to you, of course. If you want to call me professor, you can call me professor, but I prefer Philly, so you can call me Philly. On Slack, you don't need to, use any formality. Just tag me, ask me questions directly as if I'm in the same level as you are. Of course, I have some power over you because I grade you, but I don't want you to feel as if this is a barrier to us, because at the end, we're all collaborators, we're all co-authors, we're all working in this course together. Okay, so these are kind of and more warnings about, these are real science projects. What kind of projects will you be doing with me? These kinds of projects. So we'll be doing something called a replication and extension, and we'll talk about what this means. We'll do science assessments. So you will, as a first step, learn how to assess science, how to look at an article, and how to learn from that in how to do your own science. And then there's lots of resources, templates, guides, and books, and I will give you some examples of what students did. So everything that we do is on Google Docs. Everything you have the power to go and edit. And then I just verify in order to make sure that everything is okay. But basically, all of you create your own resources. So the students in the previous semesters have done amazing work. They've written a book, a 200 pages book that I'll show you later. Almost everything, including how we do replications and extension, even the syllabus. If you have something to comment, if you have something to edit, everything is editable. And then I will just verify that everything is okay and that it's solid. And then I will approve it. Also the course summary. So we'll have a collaborative course summary, a Google Doc, rather than each one of you punching the keyboard and, this is just going to be my summary. It's much better if we share everything and do everything collaboratively. We have a team. It's not just you. It's not just the other session of advanced social psychology. So we have 2 of these sessions. I do A and B. But we also have a supporting team. First, we have our TAs. You can get to know them afterwards if you want to talk to them a little bit about that. And you will get to know them more in person or in the tutorials. But we also have a team that's going to help you, that's coming from many different places in the world. We have 50 of these people who are going to help you. So we've got people from all these places around the world, from Brazil to Australia and North America and Europe. So once you submit your outputs on the replication or the assessment, I go on Twitter, I go on the mailing list, and I tell them, this is what our students did. Please come and give us some feedback. It's amazing to see that at least 1 or 2 of them will come in and give you some things, and they really have experience. So they've published, they know the topic that you're going to be dealing with, so forth. Plus, there's a team of course, all the undergraduates, about 300 of them that took courses with me, and 30 guided thesis students. Just to show you that there is the potential for publication. So in the last year alone, just in 2020, the students and I published together 15 of these. And how we do this is this way. So all these underlined are the students. All these, the first ones, are these early career researchers from around the world that help us improve. They guide us, they lead us. And after you finish your semester, they will improve this. They will verify everything that you do. And they will help us take this to the journal, address all the reviewers and everything else afterwards. You can see all these stars. So the stars means that the order here doesn't matter. All of you are first co-authors. So all of you are first authors on your projects, followed by the teaching assistants, and then me at the end. And you can see it's in some of the top journals in social psychology. So SPPS, JESP, Journal in Economics, and so forth. So At the beginning, I didn't even know if us as a community will be able to reach the journals, but the work that students are doing in my courses is able to meet the highest standards of open science, of social psychology research in our field. So hopefully, your projects, I'm very confident in our ability to do this, will end up. It might take 2 or 3 years after you graduate or finish this course, but eventually, all of the student projects are supposed to end up something like this. So we've done a lot of this. These are publications, these are preprints, more preprints in 21. So it's going very well. How many of these did we do? We've done 80 of those. So 80 that are finished with data collection, everything completed, ready to be submitted to the journal. So hopefully together as a community, all the HKU, will be able to get all these 80 published. In addition, we have 13 registered reports. And these are with some, sometimes it's 2 teams and all that. So overall, the way that I summarize this is, as the HKU community, we've been able to do 100 of these replications and extensions to contribute to the community. What are the findings? I will share with you later after we talk about the open science and the replication crisis. Lots of things that we replicated. I won't go into this. In addition, to help you in your journey, we have a lot of resources. So I'm not asking you to start from scratch. You're not starting from nothing. We'll give you templates. We'll give you guides. We'll take you step by step. There's a lot of information. Sometimes it's confusing and you will get lost, but you can ask us and we'll guide you on how to use those. You're very lucky because 3 years ago we had nothing. So we started this together. The students helped me to do these templates, but now we have all these templates for you to use and they're getting better every semester. And hopefully you'll help me to make these even better for the next group. How good are these? You can go and have a look at yourself, because just like you're sharing everything that's happening in this course, the students from last semester, I'm guessing yours as well, is up there. So you can go on this link and have a look. Maybe I'll do this for a second. Let's see about how everything works over here, but hopefully it will open okay. Let's see. So here you can see, for example, how we share things from your project. So this is 2019. Each one of those is a group. So this group did study 1. So for every replication target, for every article that you will replicate and extend, we have 2 groups working independently. So you can see 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, group A, group B, group A, group B. And then you can see that we have the pre-registration and we have all the data collection information. So for example, here you can see very large samples. So we're able to get, let's say, from 750 to 2,200. So I conduct real data collection in those courses based on my research funds. Yours is going to be a little bit different, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And there's a Dropbox. So everything that you've done, everything that we've done in the courses, you can go and access and have a look. Never mind. I just want to show you some of the reactions from, so we run replications and extensions of articles that have been published in the literature. So sometimes we worry, what are the original authors, the people who, the scholars, the big names who did these articles, what are they going to say about this? So this is just an example that I got from some of the original authors. So I really like this response over here, because when I showed the work by our students to these original scholars, this is what they wrote. Thanks for sharing your students' work with us. Truly amazed by the quality of the work. I don't think our first-year PhD students are able to do anything like that. You must have given them a lot of guidance. And then I replied back, actually, I did not give them a lot of guidance. They followed our guides, they followed our templates, but this is work by the students. And when I see the work that students are able to do, I have to admit, this is the essence of humility. This is better than most of the work that I've done during my PhD. So students are able to implement in undergraduate, 2nd to 4th year, best practices in social psychology that I have not been able to do during my PhD. And I really like this one because it shows that some of them are very excited about you doing replications of their work. Don Moore, big name in judgment decision making from Berkeley, he wrote the book on judgment and decision making. So he's really excited about our group doing replications of his work. This is some of the, I'm very active on Twitter, so you can follow me. This is some of the reactions to the projects that you've done, students have done. So really a lot of very positive reactions to this and some good reasons for why you would want to take part in this. Some of the external reviewers, so the people who are going to help you with these projects, are sometimes completely blown away by the quality of the work that you do. So these are some of the reactions. You can go over this later. Plus, some of the work that students do get media attention, even before it's published. So you can see over here from the Research Digest from the British Psychological Society. This was before it was published, but this year we actually published this work. So you can see over here that this is, so you have Shokit Young, he was the TA from last semester. So he, as an undergraduate, before he became an MPhil student and started working with me, he did this as his judgment and decision-making project. And finally, it got some really nice attention. Psychology Today, some blogs, and I really like the summary. So I'm particularly impressed by this work because it was a replication attempt done right, with pre-registered replication, complete transparency, including open data, theoretically interesting extension. And I really like the summary over here. This is good evidence that rigorous replications can be run by researchers who do not yet have a PhD. That's you. So I really believe in this. I really believe that students can do real science, real actual work. This is from the last month, and this was a big thing in the news because some of our students in the semester, I think 2019, did an assessment, a research assessment of one of the articles by somebody who's very big in our field, Dan Ariely, and they found some issues. They found some misalignment between the tables, the figures, and the text. So some of the things about the statistics over there did not make a lot of sense. And that's a great thing. This was published in 2004. Imagine if they opened things up in 2004, and then they would know that they have an error. Why do we need to wait till 2021 till Hong Kong University students go over this article? You have to ask a lot of questions. So nobody noticed this until we looked at this? The answer is no. So undergraduate students from Hong Kong University are the ones who identify these errors. And together we reported this to the journals. So the journal, together with Dan Ariely, issued what is called an expression of concern to say, we don't know what's happening in this article. We don't know if these things are solid or not. But actually, the team, the students and I, did a replication of this work. So we found errors in the statistics, but we successfully replicated the effect. So that's a very, very good thing for the community to know. So this is how Retraction Watch summarized this whole thing. So this is what they wrote. So a team of students with me did this whole thing. And I also summarized, we did 100 of these things, and I really believe in this message. So they asked me, so what's your response to this? I really believe in this. So students and early career researchers are the key to this credibility revolution, and you are our most undervalued, underappreciated stakeholder. You're not just some passive receivers, not just looking at PowerPoints and receiving the truth. You can take an active part in science. Everything in this course, and you'll see this in the syllabus, is teamwork. There is no exam. There is no one personal individual assessment. Everything that you do, you will do in teams and groups. So in order to overcome some difficulties, I know some of you are used to working on your own, and working with others is stressful and it's bothersome and it doesn't always work very well. But everything that we do in our professional life after graduation, most of the stuff that we do in our life is teamwork. So it's very important that you learn how to do this, how to collaborate with others, how to help one another. To help you help one another, we've designed things to facilitate the process. So you will have team contracts. You will work together on setting the expectations on how you want to work with one another, what is your schedule, and we have a template for that, so we'll help you do that. This is one of the first things that you'll need to submit. So we'll help you arrange into groups. We'll assign you into some of the tasks, and then you will need to sit down with your teammates and write together this contract. After the semester is done, I'll ask you to reflect on this contract. So I know that some students hate teamwork. It's very difficult for them to work with others in group. I completely understand. In a way, when I was an undergraduate, I was also like that. I encourage you to try and overcome this. Every challenge that you have, everything that bothers you, sometimes it's good to work on it. It's better to work on it when you're an undergraduate than when you become, professional in the industry. Sometimes it's too late when you're already in the work in order to work on these things. So this is the time to do this. However, if you prefer not to do teamwork, there are other classes, so you don't have to take this class. But if you're in this class, it is about teamwork and group work. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty and self-learning. So there are some students who expect to receive all the answers from the instructors or from the TAs. Every time something doesn't work out, they go to the instructors and they expect to get some truth. However, in this course, you will need to seek out the truth. You will need to go and learn by yourself. You will need to look at resources, figure things out. Not everything is going to be clear. So a lot of uncertainty and self-learning. Go over the evaluations and see some of the feedback. So there is a heavy workload. You even have somebody here to talk to about that. But some even find this too demanding. It's up to you. But this is a capstone course. This has real implications for science. This is about us learning and improving by doing things hands-on. So have a look at these things. But there are some benefits to that. You learn a lot, you improve yourself, you get to understand and experience science hands-on, not somebody telling you something, but really seeing the numbers and the figures and the methods and how science works from within. And what you do has real impact. It's not just going to be thrown away. You will forget about this in a semester. The instructor doesn't care about this. I really care about what you're doing because you are my collaborators, you are my co-authors. Together, we try and contribute in the community. Don't just take my word for it. You can go and read. So we have a column in Psychology Today. If you want to write in Psychology Today, I'm very happy to invite you to write in this column. So we have over here Rihanna. I think she just finished her MPhil. So she's in our department. So she finished her undergraduate and continued with us. So she writes about her journey, how to do a thesis with me. So she did her thesis as an undergraduate. So you can read about her experiences. And you can read about Jiane's experiences as an early career researcher that's been working with students, guiding students throughout the whole research process. So both of them have published through this project. Plus, testimonial, a video, less to read, more to hear. So he's from France, and you can click on this link on the top, and then listen to Adrian talk about how he joined, how he worked with students, what he learned by working with students, and so forth. That's it for the setting expectations, warning you, and hopefully getting you a little bit excited about what it means for you to, if you stay here, what the implications are of your work in this course. Before I proceed into the second half, any questions? Things you want to talk about? Any concerns about what I just, course structure? No? Yes.
Oh yeah, she just wanted to ask if we're randomly assigned to different teams.
Okay. It doesn't have to be. So you can, if there's somebody that you want to work with, that's a possibility. So we want to know about that. If you don't have somebody, we can help group you with each other. The one thing I want to say about this is that we have some students who are not here. So they're stuck in other places in the world, and they're doing quarantine or in other places. I think it's important that if you can meet with each other, that you do meet with one another. Of course, protection and everything is important, but I think it helps to see people in person. So I think we'll try, if we can, to group the remote people together and the face-to-face people, just so it will facilitate a smoother one. Because having a group of some people who are meeting in person and then one person who's remote, that's going to be a little bit tricky. So we'll try and do that. But if there's a group of people that you want to work with, we'll facilitate that. Okay. So putting all the syllabus and what we're doing in this course aside, the question is, why are we doing this? Why are we doing these replications and extensions? What is this replication crisis that you're talking about? Why is it so important that we understand science and assess science? We thought science is reliable. We thought that everything works. We thought that the professors really know their stuff. So what is it that you need us to do in this course? Why can't we just follow the books? And the reason for that is because in the last decade, we've seen signs of trouble. It started from social psychology. So I can say now with some pride that social psychology was one of the first to identify this problem, but the problem is not limited to social psychology. It is not limited to psychology. It's actually a science-wide crisis. And it especially is relevant for us during COVID times to know when we have information about a vaccine, when we have information about a pandemic, how do we know what is reliable and what is not reliable? So it's very important that we assess our science. When we started assessing our science, and I'll tell you why we started doing this a decade ago when I was doing my PhD, very troubling signs started to come out. So these are headlines that I've started collecting from 2015 until now about what is happening in science. So I should close this. Yeah. So you can see science replication reproducibility problem is not limited to psychology. So at the beginning, things started coming out with psychology, but you can see the Washington Post writes about this extends to other things. So you can see in medicine, the science has stopped working. We have problems with chemical research. We have problems in economics. Cancer research, I'm going to talk to you about cancer research. So this is not psychology anymore. So if a treatment in psychology doesn't work, okay, so we haven't helped somebody. But if a cancer treatment doesn't work, or we don't know how reliable it is, that's real problems. That means that people get hurt. That means that people die. At some point, people were saying, perhaps it's just all these things that are based on statistics, but if we go to computer science, if we go to physics, then we're not going to have this kind of crisis. But then this is August 2020. We already know that this is also happening in empirical computer science. And most recently, this was a big shock to me. So April 2021, it also has some problems with quantum physics, quantum computing about doing reproducibility. So what is this? What is going on? Before that, I wanted just to say that this is Nature. So when you look at the journals, the top journals in our field or science overall, you've got Nature, you've got Science, you've got PNAS, you've got all these top journals that, you know, for somebody from social sciences or social psychology to publish in Nature is a big thing. Nature occasionally, it both does academic articles and it does communication to the public. And they reached out to researchers from around the world, not just in psychology, but across the field. And they asked them, do you think that there's something going on with science? Do you think that there's a crisis? And you can see that overwhelmingly, about 90% of them say yes, either a significant crisis or a slight crisis, but there is something that we need to look at and we need to reassess and examine in the way that we do research. My main message from the next few slides and the stories, I will share some stories with you about people that I know, things that I have experienced from my PhD until now, that we need a credibility revolution. So we need to emphasize credibility, not the number of publications, not who publishes in Nature or Science, who gets to the market first and all that. But we need to emphasize something that we can all evaluate about what is credible and what is not. The ways to achieve this is what I believe in, and the reason why you're doing things the way that you're doing in this course, is that we need open science, and you will learn how to implement open science. We need collaboration. We need to work also with students, but we need to work with whoever is willing in order to make sure that the science is credible. Students and early career researchers are the key for this change. So the story started a little bit before my PhD in 2005. So this is John Ioannidis. John Ioannidis is one of the top scientists in the world right now. He's not in psychology, he's in medicine. And in 2005, he came out with this very peculiar article. At the beginning, everybody was looking at this saying, haha, that's very funny. Is this a hoax? But it's not a hoax. He actually did some simulations and he was looking at the literature. He's what is called a meta-scientist. So he looks at the literature from above, looking at everything together and trying to see all kinds of connections. And he came out with this big headline, why most published research findings are false. And I think that the first gut reaction, let's say when I saw this, when I was exposed to this during my PhD and postdoc, is that this can't be true. This person probably doesn't have any credentials. But if you look at this person, the person has published hundreds of articles. He's one of the most well-cited scholars in our field. So what does it mean from somebody who is that credible, who is that high, who advises the president and sits on all kinds of boards in the US, goes around the world telling people that he's really worried about the credibility of science? I was exposed to this in 2011. What you can see over here is that this is the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. If you are in my field, if you are in social psychology, this is where you want to publish. Because if you've published in Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, then that means you're a very good researcher. We look at findings in this journal and we believe those, we trust those, we follow those, we build our research on that. Now, in 2011, this paper came out and all of us were kind of scratching our head. What is going on over here? And this is what this said. Feeling the future, experimental evidence for anomalous retroactive influences on cognition and affect. I'll translate this to you, just in case it's not clear. People can feel the future. People react in advance to something that will happen in the future. So based on our understanding of the world, of all the evidence in physics, this seems impossible. How is it possible then that a psychologist was able to show something that all the physicists in the world have never been able to show? And he was doing this very clever. So he did this with 9 experiments, more than 1,000 participants. So again and again, he showed evidence for feeling the future. How did he do this? An experimental paradigm that we run a lot of times in psychology is that we hook people up to machines to measure the sweat, the heartbeat, all sorts of brain waves and so forth. And then we show them stimuli. We show them stimuli that is neutral, so a table, a chair, that should not elicit any reaction. And then we show other stimuli, and then things support to go wild. The strongest stimuli, which is what they used in some of the experiments over here, is pornographic stimuli. So when people of whatever gender sit and watch pornographic stimuli, the brain reacts, people sweat, their heart starts pounding. Now, what he showed is that if you sit people in front of a screen and you measure their reactions, if 1 second, or I can't remember how many milliseconds into the future, the upcoming image is going to be pornographic, then already people start reacting. So they react to something that they haven't even seen yet. It's only going to happen milliseconds into the future. And this is how they were able to demonstrate that we are able to feel the future. All of us were looking at this and trying to understand what is going on over here. Maybe this is fraud. Maybe he just made up the data. So we asked him, can you please show us the data? We want to validate this. And he shared everything. So we had a look at this and it seems like this is okay. We looked at all the evidence. Did he do this? Did he do that? Based on our understanding of statistics and science in 2011, we couldn't find anything wrong with it. Now, if we can't find anything wrong with it for something that we know is impossible in one of our top journals, then what does this mean about everything else that is published in that journal? So If we can't find anything wrong with this and we want to know that this is trustworthy, incredible, what do? How to address this situation? We run the same experiment again. So instead of asking them, can you please tell us, do this again, tell us if this works, do this again. They said, no, we're going to give this to other labs around the world and ask them if they can repeat the same kind. So this is called a replication. So you do a replication, not by the same person who published this, but by other people, not the exact same person, not the experimenter, because there's biases, he wants to publish, perhaps there's some things that he overlooked. We don't know what's going on. We want to see if other people are able to find this, and the answer is no. Other people are not able to find this. But the question is, other things in the literature we don't have replications for. So we take for granted that if it's published in Nature, in Science, in JPSP, Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, then it's true. But maybe it's not true. How do we know if we don't replicate this? The problem is that we don't do replication. Up until 2011, nobody runs replications. Up until now, people don't do replications. The reason why we get so many good reactions to what you, the students are actually doing, is because we're one of the only teams in the world that are doing replications at the moment in social psychology. All the cancer stuff, all the chemical stuff, nobody is doing replications. So we don't know whether these things are trustworthy or not. It's not only this article, but since then there's a timeline of all sorts of things that we realized don't really work very well. So in 2012, first of all, there was this paper called False Positive Psychology, and I will demonstrate to you how you can find statistically significant evidence in support of something that doesn't exist. I will show you the method by which people used to do this. We used to think that this is okay. We used to think that this is the way that you establish scientific truth, but it's not. So there's all sorts of things that we can do with statistics, consciously or subconsciously. We can convince ourselves that this is okay. And this is what we now call false positive psychology or false positive science. And these practices that lead us to find evidence for something that is random is what we called questionable research practices. We didn't know in 2011 that these are questionable, but now we do. And still, people do these because of all sorts of reasons. Incentives, social pressure, publications, prestige, I don't really know why, but we need to address these issues. We need to understand these issues better. So this paper, 2012, asked people, so how many questionable research practices are you doing? I'll show you the results a little bit later. All sorts of people came out with all sorts of tools. But the exciting stuff is that in 2012, 2014, you can see many labs 1, many labs 3, social psychologists decided we have to make sure that our science is credible. How? We get a lot of people, many labs from around the world, to replicate the findings again and again in different countries to make sure that they're solid. And then around 2015, some of the findings started to come out, and this is what they found. 2015, 2016 was the first year that we really felt we have an indication that something is very, very wrong, because a lot of classic findings in social psychology, open any books. Perhaps you've seen some TED Talks. So Amy Cuddy, if you stand like Wonder Woman, like this in front of the mirror, you get more confidence, you do better in job interviews, you have a lot of positive influences. We can't replicate this kind of thing. So we can replicate very, very small fraction of what it is that she talked about. But TED Talk, tens of millions of New York Times bestseller, a lot of popular media attention on this because people really love this story. If you can be like Wonder Woman, you can do much better in life. Perhaps you've seen this kind of experiment. If you put a pen in your mouth that forces you to smile or to frown, then it has all sorts of bodily effects, perhaps in fundamentals of social psychology or an introduction to psychology. You've read about this. We can't replicate this. Priming studies about elderly. So if you unscramble sentences about elderly, then you walk slower from the lab to the elevator. We can't replicate this. Now, to me, this was perhaps the most painful, because this was associated with a lab that I exchanged to during my PhD. These are people that I know. We have some people in our department that are doing research on self-control of willpower. And I'll share with you my experience from this case study. 2015 came out a very big paper. It doesn't happen very often that social psychologists can publish in a journal like Science. So if social psychology is published in Science, it's a big achievement. And in 2015, it happened because 100 replications with labs around the world were conducted, and their findings were these. So out of 97 replications up there on the top right, only 36% of them were significant. And we're talking about findings not in some obscure journals, but you can see the journals are JPSP, so we just talked about Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Psychological Science. So if these are published in our top journals, and we get people to try and repeat those, we're not talking about feeding the future. We're talking about things that we thought are solid. We talked in TED Talks. We published books on these. When we teach social psychology, we teach this to you. These are in all of our books. If of these 100 studies, 97 replications, only 36% of those are successfully replicated, and we have a problem. It's not only that only 36% were replicated, but in the ones that replicated, we measure effect size, we measure impact, and the impact of the effect of the manipulation, of the intervention was about half. So in the ones that worked, the effect was about half. So just imagine what this would mean for, let's say, cancer treatment or something that has real implications for people's lives, not Wonder Woman, job interviews and all that, but real treatment that it has half of the impact that you expect it to have, a vaccine or anything like that. So over here, you can see original studies versus replications. This is in terms of p-values. I don't know if you're familiar with p-values, but we'll talk about p-values. And this is about effect size. So typically, we reject the null hypothesis. So looking at the p-value as support, given that the null hypothesis is true, what is the likelihood of you observing this data? So typically, we use the criteria of 0.05. Perhaps you ran this in your stats courses. So 0.05, if it's under that, then we conclude support. So all of the findings, most of them, of the 197 of them, had lower than 0.05. But what happened when we did the replications? All over the place. In the effect size, all of them were above 0. But when we ran the replications, a lot of them overlapped with 0. The previous slide, I showed you some of the headlines or the people published about this. So half of psychology studies failed the reproducibility test. More than half of them failed. So big shock in 2015 about what's happening. Before we proceed into my personal case study, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you about what I learned about one of the biggest findings in social psychology. Okay. Case study. Now we're getting to some personal stories. So ego depletion. Ego depletion is a big theory in social psychology. The lab that I exchanged to during my PhD, this was the one major thing that they did. However, they're famous for a lot of other things. I would dare say that in the last 2 decades, ego depletion is one of the strongest, most widely published theory in social psychology. So what is ego depletion about? We all have willpower. I can even start, we had some fads, like in the 1960s, we thought that self-esteem is a big thing. So that's why a lot of American schools are all about self-esteem. But then we had some disappointment with self-esteem, because if you have too much self-esteem, if you're too confident in yourself, this can backfire. 1970s and the 80s were the age of intelligence, and then came emotional intelligence. Then we had all sorts of grit, all sorts of people came out with all sorts of constructs in order to try and predict what helps people do better. But if you remember the marshmallow studies, so there are all these funny videos of little kids that you leave them in a lab and you put one marshmallow in front of them and you tell them, I'm going to go for a walk for 10 minutes. When I come back, if the marshmallow is still there and you didn't eat the marshmallow, I will give you a second marshmallow and then you can eat them both. And the funny videos is like you see them, they're looking at this and they're smelling this and they're like pushing this and they're really trying to resist their urges to eat the marshmallow. It's very difficult for kids to overcome these urges, this desire to take the marshmallow. And a lot of them are not able to resist. So they end up eating the marshmallow when they can have actually 2 marshmallows if they only just wait 10 minutes. So one of the classic findings is that in the 1960s, they ran this experiment and then they came back in the 1980s to look at these kids, what happened to these kids. And they showed that the kids that were able to wait the 10 minutes in order to get the second marshmallow did better in life. So better careers, better relationships, better all kinds of things. So the conclusion from this is that willpower is important. The ability to overcome urges, needs, and desires in order to plan long-term, to look at benefits that are down the line rather than right now. This has all sorts of positive implications for you in your lives. And I think all of us can relate to this. And willpower, definitely self-control, has a lot of very solid evidence. This is one of the definitely solid findings in the literature that is replicated. However, ego depletion takes this a little bit further. It says willpower and self-control are a bit like a muscle. You can train this muscle. The more that you exert this kind of self-control, like when you go to the gym, the muscle grows. So you can help your kids to have more willpower. However, just like when you go to the gym and you exercise, if you use your muscle, then amount of energy that you have depletes. So your ego, the self-control, depletes. It becomes lower and lower. At the end of the day, after you went to all the advanced social psychology classes, after you've done all the teamwork for advanced social psychology, after you're tired of everything in social psychology, then you go home, you've exhausted all of your self-control and ego depletion. Finally, you have time for your friends, for your family, for your loved ones. But then you don't have any more self-control. So you snap and you're angry and you're tired and you binge on the fridge and you eat all the ice cream and all that. You are no longer able to exert self-control. So basically, ego depletion is about you have limited amounts of self-control. And when you exhausted those, or when you used some of those, you have left a lot less left later for other things that might matter. So typically the way that we measure this, we have 2 tasks. One of them is some kind of exertion of self-control. And then a different task, people do much poorly, much worse on the second task that requires self-control after they've done the first one. Very appealing. I think all of us can think of examples of where this can be relevant. And we, for 2 decades, published a lot of papers. We're talking about hundreds of articles, thousands of citations in ego depletion, and it's in all of our books. 2015, 2016, they did a mass replication effort. So you can see over here, a pre-registered replication attempt. This is called an RRR. Was conducted with 24 labs from around the world involving 2,000 participants. And all of the labs that were involved were ego depletion specialists. So they've been doing ego depletion for more than a decade. They know ego depletion. They've published on this. When they asked them, do you think that this will replicate? They say, yeah, BAM, feeling the future, of course, not replicate. But ego depletion, no doubt in anybody's mind that this will replicate. So over here, you can see all kinds of summaries on this. The problem is that when this RRR came, what they found was very disappointing. So here is Michael Inslet. He's one of the top scholars of ego depletion, willpower, self-control. And this is his tweet from Twitter. Big news. RRR of ego depletion reveals no effect, nada, zip, nothing And this was first announced in a big conference that we have that's called SPST. The nice thing about Michael is that he's very open about things. So he has a personal blog. So I took a screenshot from his blog. You can go and read this. I'm going to read the summary for you. And I'm seeing this when I'm a postdoc in Maastricht University, trying to decide the future of my academic career. This is what he writes. I have spent nearly a decade working on the concept of ego depletion. I have been rewarded for this work. I am convinced that the main reason why I get invitations to speak is because of this work. And this was the biggest shock to me. The problem is that ego depletion might not even be a thing. If you've published about this for a decade, you've found this again and again, you're an expert on ego depletion. This is why you receive. Now, because of this mass replication effort, replication register report, now you're saying this might not be even a thing? How could this be? This is what he writes. Sometimes I wonder whether I should be fixing myself more to drink, and he's talking about alcohol. I'm in a dark place. I feel like the ground is moving from underneath me, and I no longer know what is real and what is not. So just imagine yourself. I decided to become an academic. This is one of the big figures in my field. And now I'm looking at what he's writing. And he's thinking that everything that he's published in the last decade about ego depletion, one of the biggest findings in social psychology, doesn't replicate. And he doesn't even know what is real and what is not. Shocking stuff. How would you react to this? Can't be. Maybe they got something wrong. Of course, if we've done all this research, then maybe the replication wasn't done successfully. And when we asked the people from the lab that I exchanged to, the people who started ego depletion 2 decades ago, what do you think about this? This is what they wrote. Misguided effort with elusive implications. You did it all wrong. You chose the wrong article. You shouldn't replicate that one. You should replicate something else. Your method, something is wrong in the whole process. Don't think too much about this. Ego depletion is very, very solid. Now, a lot of negative things over here, but what I really like about this is that they took responsibility and they wrote, we will organize a pre-registered multi-site replication project next year using well-tested procedures, not your procedures, procedures that we've used for 2 decades and we know this is reliable. And we hereby pre-register the hypothesis that ego depletion works. So I was relieved. I thought to myself, oh, now the experts are on it. So they will show everybody that ego depletion, the best finding in social psychology, replicates very well. So this was 2016. You can see this is published over here in one of our top journals, Perspective. So this is a commentary on the mass replication effort. So 2016, 2017, we waited. So what's happening with this mass replication effort? We didn't know what's happening because we didn't hear anything. And in 2018, we were very excited because Kathleen Voss, and this is the same Kathleen Voss from this team, from the ego depletion, this is what she wrote. We conducted not 24 labs, but instead we have 40 labs from around the world, not just frequentist statistics, but also Bayesian models and everything else, best practices, state of the art, top research teams. We all thought this is terrific. So finally, we're going to see the evidence for ego depletion. However, what she found, together with this amazing team, was what they found in the previous replication effort. Very, very small effect for ego depletion. So if you want to study this, let's say that you're a research student and you want to study this kind of thing, the effect is about 0.08 Cohen's d. If you understand correlations better, this is a 0.03. If you want to study this, you need about 5,000 participants. So effects this small are not meaningful. To find an effect with 40 labs around the world that this small, it means that there is no effect. It's indistinguishable from zero. Therefore, for Michael, the person thinking of drowning himself in booze and leaving the profession, for people like me, who considered ego depletion to be a big thing, this is the end of ego depletion. 2 big mass collaborations of many labs from around the world, 24 labs of experts in ego depletion, plus 40 together, can't find support for ego depletion. That has to be the end of ego depletion. How could this be? There are all sorts of explanations. During this course, I will share a lot of these explanations with you. You have to bear with me because there's no one lecture that I can give that will explain everything. How did this happen? But this is an initial explanation. And the explanation has to do with publication bias, one of many explanations that we'll talk about. So I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase, the elephant in the room. So there's the elephant in the room that is there, and we just ignore it. But all the findings for ego depletion, I don't know if you can see these, are these p-values just below 0.05. But for each one of those, there are a lot of p-values that are above 0.05. The problem is, let's say that you have 100 studies that you ran on ego depletion, and only 2 of them worked. If you submit all these 100 to the journals will say, only these 2 that worked are interesting because they're novel. They say something new. This 98 that don't work are not interesting for us because we didn't find anything. So please reject. We don't want to see this. After a while, we learn this. So when we don't find something, we don't submit this to the journal. We put this in the file drawer and we forget about this. So the literature is filled with positive findings that they found something, but we don't see the big elephant in the room about things that people did that they don't submit to the journals, or things that people submitted to the journals that they didn't find anything, but the journals rejected. I can't even begin to explain to you with our projects, with our students, our failed replications, when we submit it to the journals, how difficult it is to get failed replications published in journals. Because they're saying, well, ego depletion, come on, this is, thousands of citations, hundreds of articles, the best minds in the field. You didn't find something, it's your fault, you did something wrong. Or, this is not novel enough, why are you repeating something that somebody else did? We already know that this is working, so why bother? So we have all the incentives. My incentives on how to get published, how to get tenure, how to get promoted, about finding things that are novel, finding new effects. Nobody is rewarding me. Nobody is incentivizing us to do just replications, just repeating everybody else's work. Now, hearing this from me, that's one thing. But luckily, Michael has a podcast. It's called 2 Psychologists, 4 Beers. So they drink beers over there. So they start by cracking a beer and talking about beers. And then they talk about all sorts of issues in psychological science. And I want you to hear a little bit from Michael, not from me, about how he felt after a decade of publishing ego depletion, how he felt about this mass replication effort. I really hope it works. I haven't tried things with this computer. Let's give it a go. I really recommend this podcast. I think Michael is less involved right now. There's a different person right now, Alexa Tollett, but both of these people, so Yoel Inbar is one of the persons who exposed big fraud in Tilburg University in the Netherlands in 2011. Now he's in university, both of them are University of Toronto, and Michael Inslet is just an open science advocate that was involved with ego depletion. So I'll play some bits and pieces just so you can see how people, scientists, big names in the field, not me, how they reflect about this.
I don't think it's just that. I think it's realizing that a lot of the stuff that I worked in the past, it's no longer legal. I no longer, I won't talk about them, right? There's a whole, the first part of my career on, staring threat and stigma. I'm dumb for a number of reasons, mostly just because I was, lost interest and wanted to work on things and I got interested in other things. But I'm just not sure anymore. I'm just not sure about how solid this stuff is, and I want to talk about stuff that I'm sure about.
So he talks a little bit fast. I hope that you can capture this. So he has this, he's not only doubting ego depletion, now he's doubting a lot of other things that he's been doing, like stereotype threat, that is a big thing. in social psychology. Now, I really like the episode where he talks about Baumeister and Kathleen Voss, the people who did the second replication effort, the people who started ego depletion. How do they feel? 2 decades after they found out that maybe ego depletion is not a thing. What happens with people like Roy Baumeister? So Michael talks about a conference that he went to where he met Roy Baumeister.
Quick story, and maybe we can move on. So I was in a meeting last week in Munich, and we'll decide to keep this in later because maybe I'll reveal things, I'm not sure. So it was actually outside of Munich in the Alps. And it was a conference that was mostly younger people. So people who were kind of pro-reform, new ways of doing things.
So he's going to an ego depletion, self-control conference in Munich, in the Alps, over there close to Germany. And a lot of people are young people who are like me, involved in open science, the science reform. This is what we call this kind of credibility revolution, science reform people, open science people.
And I only found out about this 2 weeks before we actually showed up. And my talk was prepared, I would read what I was going to talk about. And Roy Baumeister is there. He's there with you've heard of compliment sandwich, I'm sure, say one nice thing, then say the critical thing, then say a nice thing. The way the talks were set was an insult sandwich. It was like criticism, Roy Baumeister, criticism. Anyway, so
obviously a lot of people that were involved with ego depletion felt a lot of resentment about not being able to find support for ego depletion. So if Roy is there, for some reason they hold him accountable for this, rather than all of us thinking together how to improve, understanding that science is going through a process, they went at him. And now his personal reaction is the way that Michael, when he interacted with him.
He was there, and I've got to say, even though I spar with him intellectually, and I think some of his ideas are incorrect, or many of his ideas are incorrect, I have to say, I felt empathy for him. I think it was after this meeting that he was saying things like 25 years of my life are gone down the toilet. I've done nothing. What have I done? What have I contributed? What's the point of me?
So can you imagine? He was about to retire, 25 years, top social psychologist, one of the most well-cited psychologists in our field. Finally, being able to confront with this thing about ego depletion might not be a thing. So he used to be respected and admired by a lot of people. He would come and he would be the big star. But now, the way that people are responding to him and his personal disappointment, realizing 25 years later that perhaps some of the stuff that he's published on is not solid. So Michael is saying, I felt empathy I was affected by this, but I felt empathy for him.
Right. That's how he was feeling. Now,
I'm going to play just one last part, the conclusion about, there's a whole episode about, is ego depletion real? And we'll conclude by this.
I was really upset when I discovered the results of it. Because I was sure this would work. Again, I don't think it was going to be a big effect size, but I thought ego depletion is a real thing. And this changed my mind. Now, I should say that this was published in 2016, and we discovered the results of this, I guess, in 2015 or maybe a bit earlier. While I moved my priors, I changed my mind, I wasn't yet fully ready to say I do not believe in ego depletion. I was in the study. I thought, okay, maybe that wasn't a perfect study. Maybe that wasn't a great study. It was just one study, actually. And even though it was highly powered and pre-registered, it was just one study. And there's so many possible operationalizations of these ideas that this is not going to kill a major phenomenon. It's a major dent, but it's not going to kill it. But I now believe it's dead or nearly dead. And that's because I've done a lot more work since then, trying to interrogate it to my own satisfaction. And I cannot get ego depletion in my mind, even though I do not.
So he's published for a decade on this. A lot of published findings in JPSP, Psychological Science. And once these mass replication started to come out, employing open science, So pre-registrations, open data code, sharing everything with the community. Once he started doing things that way, he couldn't get ego depletion to work anymore. So you can hear from his voice, he's a speed talker, so very difficult to sometimes understand what he's saying, but I encourage you to go back and listen to this. What does it mean for somebody in a science career to realize after a decade, after 25 years, that they were wrong about something like that? Of course, TED Talks, your books for advanced social psychology, introduction to psychology, it's still there. We haven't cleaned up our books. The TED Talks are still going to be there because somebody is making money from you listening to those. So how do we establish when we listen to a TED Talk, when we read the book, how do we know what's the up to date, the current information about this? How do we know if this is credible or not? Since then, since 2015, we've been doing a lot of these mass replication efforts. So this is many labs, 28 findings. This is 21 findings that were published in Nature and in Science. So top journal, the best in our field, not in psychology, best in science. So what happens when we try to replicate this and that? These are the two mass replications from ego depletion. I'm going to summarize this to you. I'm not going to go into each one of them. Brian Nosek is the person who founded the Center of Open Science and will be using his platform, the Open Science Framework, for our projects. And this is what he summarizes. Many Labs 1, Many Labs 2, Many Labs 3, plus the Science Project, the Reproducibility Project, plus the Nature and Science Project. Together, the findings are about 90 out of 190, so 47%. And these are the top journals, our top findings. Since then, we've been doing a lot more. So a lot more people in 2015, 16 started doing these mass replications. We can't get all of these things to work. So maybe you've heard about some of these things in Introduction to Psychology, but definitely, death priming, hostility priming, honesty priming, commitment priming, embodiment, power posing, facial feedback, all sorts of things. We can't get this to work. However, when you start replicating things, you also realize what does work. One of the reasons why we are focusing on judgment and decision making is because when I needed as a postdoc to look at the whole literature and see, what do I trust? What seems trustworthy to me? I knew that in judgment and decision making, I ran things I'm Israeli, I grew up in Israel. So in Israel, I lived in the Netherlands and in the US, in the Netherlands, in the US, in Hong Kong, and in Taiwan, where I lived before. So in these 5 places where I run things on students in the classroom, and I will run things on you, I can get judgment and decision making phenomena to replicate. So I decided to focus on this, but I needed your help, all these 80 projects that we were talking about before, to see whether judgment and decision making has a better ratio than what we're going to see over here. And I'm going to tell you what our findings here in HKU are for judgment and decision making. But some of the things don't work, some of the things do work. The question is, how do we separate these two? How do we know what works and what doesn't work? My summary of social psychology in general is that the replication rate is about 30 to 50%. And in the ones that replicate, the effect size, the impact is about half. Now, the initial reactions when social psychologists came out with this, from people from the hard sciences, from the exact sciences, is that, of course, this is social psychology. It's not a science. We don't know why it's under the umbrella of social sciences. There's no such thing as social sciences. So it's not a science. If it's a science of anything, it's a science of blah, blah. We don't really think the social psychology. We didn't expect very much. Therefore, it's not surprising that things don't work out. However, since then, we also started to do things in the exact sciences. So we asked the exact sciences, how do you know? How do you know that the hard sciences, the exact sciences are doing better than social psychology? And we don't have a lot of data because it's much easier to run things on participant pool, University of Hong Kong, or online, or in big samples in psychology. We're very fortunate because we can get data easily. But if you do cancer research, if you do medical research, it's a lot more difficult. It takes a lot more time and it costs a lot more money. So we really need to wait. We don't have a lot of information. We do have some information, and the information that we do have looks very, very bad. So this is some of the summary of what I've seen from the exact sciences. You can see all sorts of things about neuro, from 6%, 1.2%, 11 to 25%. All of these are kind of anecdotal because they haven't been done very rigorously. They're from before 2015, and they were actually done by some of the corporations that wanted to know whether findings in academia are accurate or not. So they were not able to replicate a lot of things that we did in academia. But people pushed this aside and said, okay, these companies, they don't know how to do research. We, in academia, we know how to do research. But this one, cancer biology, the replication project, was supposed to be our biggest evidence that cancer research is doing much, much better. So they aimed at 50, started with 50, but as they started, they soon realized, I don't know if you've ever read a paper in psychology or in cancer, to reproduce, to understand what they did, they couldn't even understand what the researchers did with 32 of them. So only 18 out of 50, they could even start. They were not able to reproduce. And out of the 18, they were not able to find a lot. So this is a summary of one of the people who is involved in this. So in 2013, they said, okay, let's start with 50. And then in 2018, it's like, sorry, we were only able to even try 18 of them. So with the rest, we don't know what to do. We contacted the authors. They don't remember. They haven't documented things very well. And then out of those, we have a very, very disappointing. So out of the 50, only 10% were able to have a full replication. Some of them partial replication, but some of them not reproducible, not interpretable. So we don't even know how to make sense of it. So if this is the image of what the exact sciences, the hard sciences are like, we're in serious trouble. My summary of the situation. So I've been going around for 2 years around the world here at HKU, and I give these lectures, not to students, so maybe you'll believe everything that I'll say, but I give this to scholars. And some of the scholars are like, this is not happening, there is no indication for this, you're overreacting, overemphasizing. What I want to say, my big message to you, regardless of whether you think this is an indication for a problem, I think that there's a problem here. I think that this is an indication that we need to reassess, re-examine, improve with science. What differentiates science from religion is that we can question things, we can debate things, we can find ways to improve. So I'm convinced that we're in urgent need of self-reflection, reassessment, and improvement. However, some disagree with me, even here at HKU. When I go and I give these talks, people are like, we don't know what you're talking about. To them, I give these two slides. So sometimes, when you have the global warming kind of conferences, people are talking about energy independence, sustainability, green jobs, livable cities, renewable, clean water, and all that. And then somebody from the audience yells, but what if all this is a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? So my message about open science, about doing replications, about working with students, about mass mobilizing the entire community to understand what's happening with science is the same message. So we're talking about reducing publication bias, improving the use of statistics, preventing hacking, increased transparency. And then if somebody in the audience says, but what if all this is a big hoax and we create a better science for nothing? Let's just create a better science together. I don't think there's any good argument against just doing better and improving the things that we do. Our findings, and this is why I'm very proud of this project. In the beginning, my first year as an assistant professor, when I announced to the world, I'm going to start running replications with students. We're going to run these online, judgment and decision making. I'm a first year assistant professor, nobody knows me. People said, this is never going to work. How do you even expect these findings are by Princeton, Stanford scholars. This is, top of the field. You won't be able to do this because we don't know who you are, because this is with students, because. After 3 years of doing this with you, with students at HKU, our replication rate is about 68%. So my intuition of judgment and decision-making being a little bit better than other fields seem to be based on something. This is not considered to be ultimate proof of that, because this is not randomized samples. I did not have a RCT kind of things about things with open science replication and things without, or judgment decision making and other things. These are classics that I chose to work with you on, things that I think are solid. But generally, not only were the students that nobody thought can do replications were able to replicate 68%, but even with these things, the mixed and inconclusive, even with the ones with the unsuccessful, the students realize things that don't make sense. Students offer directions for how to improve, how to do better if we want to keep doing research on these things. Just like I shared with you, sometimes they find errors in the actual articles. And everything that we do helps science, especially in judgment decision making, improve. So regardless of whether the replication is successful or not, the students have done a remarkable scientific work here. Really proud of the students that were involved in this. How many? We have about 180 that were finished, 13 times, I can't remember how many teams working on ongoing projects. And all this is from my own funding to collect the data. Do you want to know more about this? I don't know if this intrigued you, or are you ambivalent, suspicious, hesitant? Students came to me in the second year and asked me, you've been talking about this for over a year now, and you're telling us all the books that we have are no longer any good. Where can we read about this? And I told them, I'm really sorry, there's no book that's explaining this. This year is different because this year a lot of books came out. So you can go and read real books. But 2 years ago, we didn't have books. So I told the students, how about we write this book together? So what we did in Fundamentals of Social Psychology, I don't know if some of you were with me 2 years ago, but what we did is that we separated 13 chapters, teams of 5 and 6. The groups wrote the chapters. We got the teaching assistants and the entire community to give feedback. And now we have a very, very comprehensive book about open science. It's updated until 2019, but it really has a lot of resources. So if you want to know the citations, if you want to know what's happening in the field, you can go. And this is written by Hong Kong University students. Okay, my understanding of where we're headed and all the things that we're doing in this course and all of my personal research is based on this, is that we really need to emphasize trustworthiness, reproducibility, and replicability. If we emphasize science and nature publication for our tenure or for accepting graduate students, we're never going to address this issue. We really need to rethink the way that we're doing science and the incentives and the way that we publish and the way that we work with students. So I laid out all these foundations. We'll talk about those during the semester, but this is the most important over here. Full transparency. Everything that I do from the first stage of thinking about an idea until the end, until it's published, and I share all the data in the code, full transparency. So this includes not just the materials, the data in the code, but the entire process and what decisions did I make. Exclusions of conditions, exclusions of participants, everything in that process. Let me see how much time I have. Okay, so I'll tell you of one more example, and I think this will end for today, about what is happening, what's leading to this science problem. And I'll give you a case study. This is a real case study, real headlines. Maybe you even saw these headlines. This came out 2015, I think, something like that. So somebody, a researcher, did a real research about what's the effect of chocolate. And he was able to find empirical evidence, and this is real empirical evidence, that eating chocolates leads to weight loss. This is really good news for us because this is what we've always wanted to hear. All the stuff that we know is bad for us and we feel guilty for. We want somebody to tell us, especially if it's a scientist, that they've done rigorous collected evidence and they found that chocolate leads to weight loss. And you can see all the big headlines from the Huffington Post. Scientists say eating chocolate can help you lose weight. Has the world gone cocoa? Eating chocolate can help you lose weight. So 2015, so John here is a science blogger. And this is the blog post that came after this big these big headlines. And this is what he wrote. I fooled millions into thinking chocolate helps weight loss. Here's how. He didn't fabricate the data. He just did what we refer to as p-hacking, hacking the p-value to become lower than 0.05 in order to find evidence. This is what he wrote. Here's the dirty little science secret. If you measure a large number of things about a small number of people, you're almost guaranteed to get a statistically significant p-value lower than 0.05 result. How did he do this? He had 18 different measurements. He didn't tell everybody, I found evidence for weight loss, but I didn't find it for weight, cholesterol, sodium, blah. Because of the randomness of the universe, because of the way statistics works, if you measure 18 things, one of them will come statistically significant. But nobody is forcing you to report all the 18 things. So the journal is going to reject this anyway. So I'm not going to tell anybody about this. I'm just going to tell you about this one thing that came out because of the randomness of the universe. Plus, he measured only 15 people, so a lot of noise. Plus, even then, he couldn't get the p-value lower than 0.05, so he dropped one subject. He said, maybe he was feeling sick that day. I think he had some problems, so that's why let's leave him out. And then suddenly, p-value. So this is what he concludes. Study design is a recipe for false positives. So if somebody is going to repeat this, you can try this on yourself, eat a lot of chocolate, and see if this leads to weight loss. You're not going to get a good replication of this. Lots of other problems. I won't go into this. We'll talk about this later. I'm going to show you, and we're going to end with a demonstration. How do you p-hack? Some people are telling me, don't show this to students because then it's very important that you know that this is an issue, that this is how it's done, so that you don't do this. And when you see and you read the scientific evidence, you will know that this is how they've done this. So let's do some p-hacking. This is a shiny app. I don't know what statistics language you learned, but we're increasingly, sorry. We're moving to R. So I don't know why in some schools they still teach SPSS. R is a programming language that we use for statistics. I will give a workshop on R and Jamovi, which we will be using in this course. One of the nice things about R is that you can create something called a shiny app. So the shiny app allows you to simulate, to show all kinds of things to people who don't know R. So let's say you don't know R, and you want to know how this thing with p-hacking works. This is a simulation. Let's take, for example, ego depletion. So type in your favorite effect. Let's call this ego depletion. So in every experimental design, we have two groups. We have the ego depletion group and we have the control group. And we want to show that there is an effect. Compared to the control group, ego depletion has some kind of an effect. So, they will do worse in a self-control test, the second self-control test. What we'll do is that we'll keep this at 20 participants for each group, but we'll include, just like the chocolate study, we'll include a lot of DVs, and we'll simulate. So here, I'm asking you to simulate as if the true effect, a Cohen's d of 0. Cohen's d of 0, it means that there shouldn't be any effect over there. We should not see p-value lower than 0.05. So everything that I'm showing you right now is random noise. Should not have any evidence, support for anything, definitely not here with ego depletion. So I'm going to simulate. I'm going to run an experiment with these 10 DVs. And already you can see over here all the results. So the nice thing about this simulator is that it already gives us all the, so it ran 20 and 20, so overall 40. And you can see the test. So this is random data, completely simulated. And you can see the two groups, so compared to each other. And now we can see for all the different DVs, what are the results? What are the p-values? And what you can see already is that this DV7 is very close to 0.05. So you're thinking, so you're very excited. So you ran this study, and DV number 7 is very close to 0.05. And you're saying, okay, maybe I can publish in Science. I'm going to show that ego depletion works with this DV number 7. Nobody needs to know about the other 9 DVs. Let's just focus on DV number 7. Just like the chocolate study, I'm looking at these, the distribution over here, and then I remember this is ego depletion group, and this is the non-ego depletion group. I remember that this one over here, he was sick that day, so I'm just going to take him out. So if I take him out and I go back to DV number 7, now you can see, actually, I've got support, and I have a p-value of 0.043. Now, it's not the people who did this back in, let's say, 2011, or some people are still doing this, thought that what they're doing is bad. Really, I remember doing my PhD, people explaining it. So you look at the evidence and you try to make sense. Why didn't this work? Because you know this is going to work. You had your hypothesis, right? Why didn't this work? That person that day reported to me. But you're not supposed to look at the data, understand how each one contributes to your effect, and then decide post-hoc. The way that we do this in our course, the way that science should be and is not at the moment, is that you pre-register. You have a plan before you collect the data, and you follow that plan very, very carefully. And every deviation from this plan, you need to be able to explain this to other researchers. Now, if I show what I just did here to other researchers, they're going to say, come on, this doesn't make any sense. You just wanted to create. This was common practice, I can tell you. In 2011, when I was doing my PhD, people were looking at the data and saying, okay, so these were late, these didn't feel very well. And then looking again and again at these effects. Very disturbing, because especially now we understand kind of like the implications for this kind of thing. But I'm going to return him, or her, this participant. And I'm going to show you, people were asking, how did BEM in 2011 show support for feeling the future? Because he showed us everything that he did. And we didn't see any indication for these kinds of weird exclusions or anything. What did he do? What I'm going to show you right now is what we call the dance of the p-values. I'm going to add participants. I'm going to add 10 participants every time. And I want you to closely observe what the p-values are. I'm going to show you that if I do this long enough, I will find support for whatever I want. Here we go. So now we have this tab called Now p-hack. And you can see that I can add 5, I can add 10, I can also add control variables. So a lot of people were saying maybe if you add some controls, you can do all sorts of things. So I'm going to add 10. And already you can see 7 disappeared. All sorts of things happen. I'm going to add 10 more. Just look at what happens to the p-values. I'm going to add 10 more. It doesn't look like it's even close to anything. I'm going to add more. I'm going to add more, 10 more. Now suddenly DV1 looks like it's close just by adding more participants. So I add participants and I look. I add participants and I look. I add participants and I look. We didn't understand in 2011 that peaking is wrong because you create endless opportunities for you to find the p-value that you're looking for. So just by looking at this one over here, I can add all kinds of controls. And then maybe I can reduce this to something that is getting close to 0.05. But I'm not going to control, I'm just going to keep adding. So I'm adding, oh, now it's really close. Maybe now if I add control variables, I'm going to add all these control variables. And now I can publish in Science and Nature with DV number 1, not DV number 7. But let's say I don't want this. I want this to happen naturally. And this is kind of like what now we know based on interviews, what BEM did in 2011, Feeling the Future. I'm just going to keep adding 10, just like suddenly it disappears. There's no more DV number 1. I'm going to keep adding. We're already at 200 participants. I'm going to keep adding. Suddenly, DV number 9 looks promising. I'm going to keep adding. DV number 9. I didn't do anything. I just added 10, added 10. I didn't even play with exclusions. I just added, looked, added, looked. And now we have a p-value. Now I can publish. But this is not enough for me because I really want a science publication. I want 2 DVs. Not only chocolate leads to weight loss, but it also reduces cholesterol. Let's see if I can get 2 of these to work. I'm going to add 10 more. Okay. Trust me when I say you can play with this on your own. But if I keep pressing this, even 2 of the DVs are going to become p-value significant. Yeah, so you can see DV number 7 now. So just before that, it bleeped. So there was 2 of them that had green. So if I keep adding the p-values, the dance of the p-values, because the universe is complex, it's filled with randomness. If you play enough with the randomness, you're gonna get what you're looking for. So this is what we call questionable research practices, p-hacking. And with this, I'm going to conclude. This is a demonstration. I have a lot of more demonstrations throughout the course. I'm gonna teach you a lot about science, what is going on, and how we can fix this. For now, I'm going to conclude. So my homework for you is, now that you understand what this course is about, what we plan to do over here, I please ask that you go over the syllabus. It's going to be on the Moodle. We're going to have an announcement on Slack. It's a very, very long and detailed syllabus, but I really ask that you go over this, ask as many questions as you can. By the end of the second week, once we know who is here and who is not, we'll ask you to do a quiz on the syllabus. It's not hard. It's just ensuring that you've read it. We'll form the groups and we'll start working together on projects. Any questions, things that you want to discuss before we depart? I'm going to stay here for 5-10 minutes. If you want to come talk to me, I'm available to you. See you next week.